When the mind is restless, it travels 1,000 miles. But when you return to the breath, you return home. Each day, from the moment we awaken, we are pulled. Pulled by screens, pulled by schedules, pulled by the future, and haunted by the past. In all this pulling, one thing remains untouched, waiting patiently to be noticed: the breath. The breath is the bridge. Not a metaphorical one, a real one. A living thread between the visible and invisible, between body and mind, between the outside noise and the inner stillness. When the mind is scattered and running, the breath remains. Quiet, waiting. It does not chase, it does not demand, it simply continues, like a river that never stops flowing, whether you watch it or not. Every single moment, the breath is moving. Inhale, exhale, again and again. And yet, so many walk through life never noticing it, never meeting it, as if it were too ordinary to be sacred. But it is in the ordinary that the extraordinary is hidden. If you stop, even for a moment, and bring your attention to the breath, you'll notice everything slows down. Your thoughts lose their sharpness. The noise of the world grows softer. The breath does not ask you to believe anything. It only asks you to notice. When life becomes overwhelming, people search for a way out. Some turn to distraction, others to stimulation. But the breath is not a way out. It is a way in, into presence, into clarity, into peace. The breath cannot be owned, and it cannot be stored. You cannot inhale once and expect to be satisfied forever. You must meet it again and again, as you meet a friend. Each breath a reunion, each breath a return. If the mind is the wind, the breath is the mountain. If the thoughts are fire, the breath is water. It balances, it steadies, it cools. And it reminds you that you are not just a thinker of thoughts. You are the one who watches. And when the breath becomes your anchor, the storm may still rage, but you no longer drift. It is simple to say, but true breathing is not mechanical. It is conscious, intentional, and it is not about control. It is about awareness. When you begin to pay attention to how you breathe, you begin to understand how you live. Shallow breath, shallow presence. Deep breath, deep being. The way you breathe is the way you meet the world. Notice how the breath changes when you are afraid. It becomes short, rapid, tight. Notice how it softens when you are safe. Long, deep, open. The breath reflects your inner state more honestly than words ever could. You can lie with language, but not with breath. The body doesn't lie. The breath always tells the truth. There is no past in the breath, no future either. The breath only exists now, this moment, and this one, and this one. So when you focus on it, you are pulled away from time. You are returned to the present, where life actually happens. Not in memory, not in imagination, but here, where you are, where the breath is. To walk through life without awareness of breath is to sleep while awake. But to awaken to the breath is to remember something ancient, something you knew before knowledge, something you practiced before practice. The newborn does not learn to breathe, it just breathes. And in that breath is life, pure and untouched. In moments of stress, people often say, take a deep breath. There is wisdom in that. Because when you take a deep breath, you don't just pull air into your lungs, you make space. In the lungs, in the mind, in the heart. You give yourself room to see clearly, to feel deeply, to choose wisely. You interrupt the cycle of reaction and make room for awareness. If someone loses their way in the forest, they do not run faster, they stop. They listen. They return to a known point. The breath is that point. When you feel lost, return. Inhale, exhale, and again. No hurry, no need to fix or force. Just awareness. Even the most complex meditation begins with breath. Every discipline of stillness starts at the same doorway, and that doorway is always open. The mind may wander 1,000 miles in a second, but the breath never leaves. It is loyal, it is consistent, and it is always now. You may seek peace in many places, in teachings, in travels, in silence. But none of them will work if you do not first know how to be with the breath. Because peace is not found, it is revealed, and the breath reveals everything. where there is tension, where there is fear, where there is resistance, and where there is flow. To trust the breath is to trust life itself. To follow the breath is to follow the thread that leads you back to yourself. Not a new self, not a different self, but the one that was always there, beneath the distractions, beneath the labels, beneath the noise. The breath is not just a function. It is a path, a disciple, a wisdom, a teacher. It is the bridge between who you think you are and who you truly are. Change your breath, change your perception. It sounds too simple for a mind that is used to complexity. But the truth is often simple. Complexity is the armor we wear when we forget how to listen. The breath does not lie. It responds immediately to how you are inside, and it shapes what you see outside. When you are anxious, your breath is shallow, sharp, and fast. Your chest tightens. Shoulders rise. The world feels like it's closing in. But it is not the world that has changed. It is your breath. And your breath has changed the way you perceive. The body is not separate from the mind. The breath connects them both. That is why in moments of fear or anger, your breath alters before you speak, before you act. Something inside reacts, and the breath echoes it. In that moment, you are not seeing the situation. You are seeing your reaction. The breath becomes a filter, and through that filter, your world is shaped. So when you change the breath, you are not just calming the body. You are reshaping the lens through which you view reality. When the breath is calm, slow, steady, the nervous system softens. The muscles release. The mind stops anticipating and starts observing. You no longer see with tension. You see with clarity. A relaxed breath dissolves the fog that panic creates. It does not remove the challenge, but it allows you to meet it from a place of strength. The breath, when slowed, activates the parasympathetic response, the body's own signal for safety. When the body feels safe, the mind no longer needs to defend itself. It can open, receive, respond, not react. There is a space between stimulus and response. Most people miss it. They jump from trigger to reaction without awareness. But breath is the key to opening that space. When a thought or emotion arises and you breathe deeply, consciously, fully, you create a pause. In that pause is power, the power to choose, to reflect, to redirect. The breath creates distance, not separation from life, but space within life to engage wisely. Breath is not only physical, it is energetic. The ancient traditions knew this. They called it prana, chi, life force. This energy is carried on the wave of breath, and the quality of your breathing determines how this energy moves. Shallow breath traps energy. Deep breath releases it. Held breath creates pressure. Flowing breath creates balance. And when balance returns, your perception expands. You stop looking at life like a problem to solve and begin to see it as a process to experience. You can observe this in the simplest of ways. In the morning, when the breath is soft and long, the world appears calm. But if you begin your day rushing, shallow in breath and tight in body, everything feels urgent. The same street looks noisy. The same people feel irritating. The same tasks seem heavier. But it is not the world that became different overnight. It is your inner state. And the breath is the mirror of that state. When you become mindful of your breath, you begin to notice patterns. How certain thoughts speed it up. How certain places tighten it. How certain people constrict it. The breath becomes your teacher. It tells you when to slow down, when to listen, when to step back, and when to stay present. It gives feedback without judgment, without words, without confusion. Perception is not fixed. It bends and shifts with awareness. And breath is the most accessible tool to adjust that awareness. You do not need to retreat to a mountain or sit in silence for hours to find presence. One deep breath, taken with attention, can be enough to shift everything. The breath is like a compass. When you feel lost in thought, in emotion, in overwhelm, it brings you back to center, to the place inside you that watches without fear. In moments of conflict, the breath becomes short and loud. In moments of beauty, it becomes deep and soft. So which came first? The breath or the perception, they shape each other. They are not separate. Like a river shapes the land, and the land shapes the river, they move together. People try to control thoughts with more thoughts. But thoughts cannot untangle themselves. The breath, however, can bypass the noise. It doesn't argue. It doesn't reason. It simply returns. With each inhale you create space. With each exhale you let go. And in that rhythm, your perception begins to clear. You see people not as obstacles, but as reflections. You see moments not as threats, but as invitations. You see yourself not as a fragment, but as a witness to the whole. In every breath is a choice. The choice to tense or release, to hurry or to pause, to resist or to allow. The more aware you become of that choice, the more you realize that you are never trapped. You are simply breathing unconsciously. And the moment you become conscious again, the prison dissolves. Not because the world changed, but because your breath did. 3 minutes is not short, but most minds will dismiss it. They will say it is too small to matter, too brief to bring change, too quick to be sacred. The modern mind is conditioned to seek depth through duration, to believe that something must be long to be meaningful. But truth is not measured in hours. Transformation does not depend on time, it depends on attention. The way you enter one moment determines what it gives back to you. And when you enter even 3 minutes with full awareness, you step outside the ordinary sense of time. One breath can change a state. One glance can soften a heart. One moment can shape a lifetime. So what then is 3 full minutes? Not short, not fleeting, but wide open and complete when filled with presence. The clock may call it 3 minutes. But presence does not care for numbers. In those 3 minutes, you could rush, you could scroll, you could think, and they would vanish unnoticed. Or you could sit still, close your eyes, feel the air enter and leave your body. You could meet your breath as if meeting yourself for the first time. You could notice how the body softens when you stop chasing. You could hear the silence between thoughts. You could become so still that even the ticking of a second hand becomes music. And then, 3 minutes becomes more than time. It becomes a space. Intention is the key. Without intention, time is lost. With intention, time opens. There are people who have sat for years without changing. And there are those who have sat for minutes and awakened. It is not the posture or the practice. It is the presence you bring to it. The sincerity with which you show up. When you say, I am here, fully here for these 3 minutes, you are no longer a prisoner of the past or the future. You are free. You have stepped into the only place where life truly happens. Now, you can feel it in the breath. A breath taken with care has weight, depth, power. It nourishes not just the lungs, but the mind, the emotions, even the way you carry yourself. One breath leads to another, and soon, the rhythm of life starts to change. Thoughts no longer pull you like wild horses. Emotions no longer throw you from side to side. You begin to witness instead of react. You begin to see instead of assume. You begin to understand not through thinking, but through stillness. 3 minutes of breathing can soften tension that has lived in the body for years. It can bring calm to a mind that has been restless all day. It can give clarity where there was confusion. Not because the minutes are magic, but because you are meeting them with presence. The mind will resist at first. It will tell you there is something else more important. It will try to pull you toward habit, toward urgency, toward distraction. But if you sit through that noise, even for a short time, you begin to see what is underneath. Beneath the rush is rest. Beneath the tension is release. Beneath the noise is silence, waiting to be remembered. People often underestimate the power of the pause, but nature never does. The pause between seasons changes everything. The stillness between waves gives the ocean its rhythm. The breath held gently between inhale and exhale teaches you the balance of effort and surrender. In 3 minutes of conscious breath, you join that rhythm. You stop pushing and start listening. And in that listening, you start to return. not to an idea of yourself, but to the self before the noise, the one who watches, who feels, who simply is. You do not need to go far. You do not need to add anything. You need only remove what is extra. 3 minutes of stillness each day begins to dissolve the layers, the urgency, the clutter, the endless seeking. You start to feel what has always been there, a quiet, steady presence beneath the surface of doing. It does not need to be improved, it only needs to be remembered. And remembering takes only a moment, a choice, a breath, and then another, and another. Even the busiest day holds 3 minutes. Even the most distracted mind can be still for a breath. What matters is not how much time you have, but how you use it. A distracted hour may bring nothing, but a focused minute may bring peace. You can sit in a temple and remain lost in thought. Or you can sit in your kitchen and find complete presence. The difference is intention. The difference is awareness. When you stop trying to control time, and instead meet time as it is, it reveals its true nature. Not linear, but alive. Not small, but infinite when entered fully. So let others call it short. You will know better. You will know that 3 minutes, used with intention, is not time passing. It is time expanding. Breathing with awareness is not passive. It is not a retreat from the world. It is not a quiet act of escape or a sign of weakness. To breathe with awareness is to take responsibility for the one thing you can control in any moment, your inner state. And there is no greater strength than that. Most people breathe only enough to survive. Their breath follows their thoughts, racing when they panic, shrinking when they fear, holding when they resist. But to breathe with awareness is to reverse the order. It is to lead, not to follow. It is to become the master of your internal landscape, rather than a servant of passing emotions. The breath is not simply air, it is intelligence. It responds, it adapts, it mirrors your state. And through awareness, it also guides. It is like a river flowing through the body. When you do not pay attention to it, it moves on its own, affected by winds and storms. But when you enter it with presence, it becomes still, clear, powerful. You begin to direct it, not with force, but with intention. And that direction shapes your energy, your thoughts, your actions. Breathing with awareness turns something automatic into something transformative. It is a kind of training, but not the kind that tenses the body or forces the will. It is training in presence, in discipline, in subtlety. With each breath, you observe rather than interfere. You notice rather than react. You listen to what the body says before the mind turns it into a story. You become more precise in how you experience each moment. This is not passive, this is mastery. The kind that requires no display, no noise, no show. Just quiet consistency. Just the ability to return again and again to the point of balance inside you. The world teaches us to move fast, to act, to speak, to decide. But breathing with awareness teaches something else. It teaches how to pause before speaking, how to feel before reacting, how to root before rising. It is the art of stability. Without it, action becomes impulsive. Speech becomes careless. Movement becomes disconnected. But when breath becomes conscious, even the smallest action is charged with clarity. Even silence carries presence. Even stillness communicates power. It is easy to act from emotion. It is easy to follow old patterns. But it takes real strength to stop in the middle of that momentum and breathe. Not to suppress, but to center. Not to escape, but to engage with clarity. When you breathe with awareness, you become like a mountain in the middle of changing weather. The winds may come, the rain may fall, but you do not move. You observe, you stay, you feel everything, but you are not consumed by it. There is a kind of attention that is sharp but soft, that sees everything but judges nothing, that remains steady without becoming rigid. This is the quality that breathing with awareness develops. Each inhale becomes a point of connection. Each exhale becomes a release of what is not needed. In this way, the breath cleans the inner space, not only of physical tension, but of mental clutter, of emotional residue, of unconscious habits. And this cleaning is not a one-time act. It is a practice, a ritual, a discipline that deepens over time. When you walk through life without awareness of breath, you are constantly pulled by the world. Every sound becomes a distraction. Every emotion becomes a command. Every discomfort becomes an enemy. But when breath becomes your companion, you no longer chase peace, you carry it. You do not need silence around you because you have built it within you. And that silence becomes your ground. It becomes the space from which you see, speak, and move. Breathing with awareness is the foundation of all higher practices. Without it, meditation is mechanical. Without it, focus is forced. Without it, even strength becomes fragile. But with it, the simplest moment becomes sacred. A walk becomes a meditation. A pause becomes a reset. A conversation becomes a mindful exchange. The breath becomes the thread that connects everything together, weaving body, mind, and heart into one coherent presence. You begin to notice the shift not in grand moments, but in the small ones. You feel yourself choosing calm instead of panic, clarity instead of confusion, stillness instead of reaction. Not because you tried to control the outside, but because you mastered what was inside. And this mastery is not loud, it is not something to prove. It is quiet, steady, unseen by most, but deeply felt by you. Breathing with awareness is not a retreat from life. It is preparation for it. It is the cultivation of space within chaos, focus within distraction, softness within difficulty. And when practiced daily, it begins to shape not only how you feel, but who you are becoming. Where the breath goes, the mind follows. Where the mind goes, energy flows. This truth is not poetic. It is practical. It is something that can be observed directly, not just believed. When the breath is shallow, high in the chest, and broken by distraction, the mind becomes restless, scattered, reactive. But when the breath is deep, slow, grounded in the belly and filled with presence, the mind begins to mirror that depth and stillness. It calms not because it was forced to, but because it was guided. The mind, like a child, does not respond well to commands, but it responds to rhythm, to gentleness, to steady repetition. And the breath, when conscious, becomes that rhythm, a silent drum that the mind gradually begins to follow. In everyday life, attention is pulled in many directions. The noise of the world enters through the senses, and the mind follows wherever that stimulation leads. One thought leads to another, one reaction triggers the next. There is no center, only motion, but the breath can become the anchor, a place to return to, a point of reference that remains still even while everything else moves. When you focus on the breath, you are not escaping reality. You are entering it more directly, without distortion. The breath is always now. It cannot exist in the past or future. To follow it is to return to the present again and again. Once the mind is steady, energy begins to gather. Most people lose energy not through effort, but through misdirection. Their thoughts pull them into regret, fear, judgment, and fantasy. Each of these takes energy from the body, from the moment, from presence. It is like pouring water into the sand. Effort is made, but nothing remains. But when the mind is centered on breath, energy stops leaking. It begins to collect, to deepen. A kind of inner strength builds. Quiet, calm, not needing to be expressed, but unmistakable. This is not the energy of excitement or adrenaline. It is the energy of awareness itself, pure, stable, alive. It is not mystical. It is simply the way attention works. Where you place your awareness is where your life force begins to move. And when the breath is chosen as the object of awareness, the movement of energy becomes natural. It flows through the body without obstruction. Muscles soften, the face relaxes, the eyes clear, emotions settle. Not because you have done something to them, but because you have stopped doing what blocks them. The breath is not trying to fix, it is trying to harmonize. You can test this for yourself. In a moment of anxiety, simply pause and watch where the breath is. It is likely shallow, disconnected from the lower body. The mind is moving fast. You are no longer feeling. You are predicting. But as soon as you take one conscious breath, the pattern begins to shift. Not all at once, but gradually, consistently. The mind begins to feel the breath's pace and it adjusts. Thoughts slow. The feeling of being overwhelmed begins to thin. You are still in the same situation, but the space within you has changed. That space is created by breath, sustained by awareness, and protected by intention. It is not that breath controls the mind or the mind controls the energy. It is more accurate to say they move together, like a current and the riverbed. When one shifts, the others follow. That is why even a short breathing practice can change the mood of a whole day. That is why conscious breathing before a difficult conversation can change its tone. That is why a few minutes of mindful breath upon waking can direct the energy of the entire morning. You are setting the frequency through which the mind and body will operate, and energy does not argue. It flows where it is guided. If the breath is anxious, the mind becomes defensive. If the breath is peaceful, the mind becomes open. And wherever the mind goes, energy follows. So if the mind is filled with judgment, energy becomes tense. If the mind holds gratitude, energy becomes expansive. If the mind is lost in memory, energy becomes heavy. But if the mind is present, the energy becomes clear and available. This is not philosophy, it is direct observation. It requires no belief, only awareness. In this way, the breath becomes a tool, a mirror, and a path. A tool to guide attention, a mirror that reveals the state of being, and a path toward inner balance. When breath, mind, and energy align, there is no conflict inside. Actions become simpler, words become more precise, the body feels lighter, and life begins to feel less like something to control, and more like something to participate in fully. Stillness is not the absence of movement. It is the depth beneath it. In a world that equates silence with emptiness and rest with laziness, the nature of stillness is misunderstood. Stillness is often mistaken for a lack of activity, a void, or a pause between important things. But true stillness is not a gap. It is not something passive or dull. It is not a break from life. It is life, witnessed from its center. It does not reject movement. It holds it. It does not avoid sound. It listens to it more fully. Stillness is the depth that remains untouched by surface waves. The eye of the storm that remains unmoved while everything else circles around it. You can sit for hours without being still. The body can be quiet, and yet the mind races, the heart clenches, the breath shortens. And you can be in motion, walking, working, even speaking, and yet stillness can remain within you. Because stillness is not about stopping what is outside. It is about anchoring what is within. It is the space from which you observe without being pulled, engage without being scattered, act without being reactive. It is the inner ground that does not shake when circumstances shift. And this ground is not something you build. It is something you uncover. It has always been there, beneath the noise, beneath the tension, beneath the effort. Most people seek peace by controlling what surrounds them. They try to eliminate distraction, reduce conflict, escape pressure. But if peace depends on the world being quiet, it will always be fragile. Because the world is not meant to be still. It moves, it changes, it surprises. True stillness is not found by silencing the world. It is found by becoming so grounded within that no matter what happens, you are not pushed and pulled. You can feel everything, but you are no longer ruled by it. Emotions rise, but they no longer flood you. Thoughts appear, but they no longer carry you away. The breath moves in and out, but the presence remains steady. That is stillness, not silence, but centeredness. Stillness does not mean you become passive or indifferent. In fact, it sharpens your perception. From stillness, you see more clearly, you listen more deeply, you choose more wisely. Because you are not reacting, you are responding. There is space between stimulus and action. And in that space, intelligence awakens. You do not need to force outcomes or rush to fix things. You trust the timing of the moment. You meet life as it is, not as a projection or fear. And this meeting happens from the depth, not the surface. the practice of breath, the ritual of awareness, the act of returning to the present. These are not efforts to stop life, but to live it more directly. Stillness is what makes that possible. It allows you to experience without distortion, to speak without defense, to move without resistance. It creates clarity without tension, power without aggression, presence without pressure. And this stillness is not separate from breath. It is revealed by it. Each inhale brings you into the moment. Each exhale softens the edges of effort. Over time, the breath becomes more than air. It becomes a doorway into depth. The body begins to respond to this shift. It becomes more efficient, more relaxed, more alive. Muscles stop gripping out of habit. The nervous system resets. Even the eyes soften, no longer searching but seeing. From stillness, your senses are no longer hyper, alert or dulled. They become attuned. You begin to feel not just your body, but the subtle movements within it. You begin to hear not just sounds, but silence behind them. You begin to know not just thoughts, but the space in which they arise. And from this knowing, a new kind of intelligence is born, one that does not rush to explain, but rests in understanding. Stillness reveals what has always been true, that you are not the movement of the mind, not the storm of emotions, not the tension in the body. You are the witness of them. You are the one who watches without judgment, who feels without drowning, who breathes without grasping. And in this role, there is freedom, because you are no longer trapped in the changing. You are grounded in the unchanging. And that unchanging is not dull or distant. It is vibrant, it is present, it is alive with awareness. In stillness, time feels different. It stretches, not because it slows down, but because you are fully in it. Each moment expands. Each sensation becomes richer. There is no need to rush to the next thing. The depth of experience is no longer measured by how much you do, but by how fully you are there. And from that fullness, even simple things become profound. The taste of water, the sound of a leaf, the rhythm of footsteps, each becomes complete. Not because life has changed, but because you are meeting it from its depth, not its surface.